Happy Father's Day. I'm Charlie Sykes. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, another tragic mass shooting, this time at a church in Charleston, South Carolina. Police arrested the killer the next day. The Pope issued an encyclical on global warming. Scott Walker edges closer to a presidential bid, joining a growing crowd of candidates that now includes Donald Trump. Tiger Woods continues his epic meltdown, and a Waukesha judge hears testimony on whether a 13-year-old girl should be transferred to juvenile court in the Slender Man stabbing case. But we start with gridlock in Madison. Republicans control state government, but they can't seem to agree on a budget. The hang-ups? Funding for a new Bucks arena, the repeal of so-called prevailing wage legislation, and how to pay for a massive transportation budget. Legislators don't want to borrow $1.3 billion for roads and seem to be willing to cut Scott Walker's proposed bonding by $800 million, but they can't agree on what projects to cut. Last week, the co-chair of the Joint Finance Committee, Alberta Darling, suggested that some Assembly Republicans were pushing the delays in the massive zoo interchange project in order to put pressure on legislators to increase revenues. Well, that led to a squabble, with Assembly Speaker Robin Vos and committee co-chair John Nygren calling her statements false and asking her, and this is their phrase, to walk her statement back. Darling refused. Joining me on our panel this morning, defense attorney Dan Adams, former Republican State Representative Michelle Litchens, political strategist Lynn DeBruin, and the managing editor of RightWisconsin.com, Colin Roth. So on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the level of dysfunction among Republicans in Madison?
As high as it's been in recent memory. I mean, the Scott Walker era and this Republican-controlled government since 2010 has really been marked by a lot of uniformity in the mission and what they've done. And I think now you're starting to see some real cracks in that. I think a lot of it has to do with the absence of the governor. He's not been around. He's very clearly running for president, and so that has kind of been where when the cat's away, the mouse will play, and so this has been pretty dysfunctional.
I won't hold you. Nobody knows the answer, but the governor is suggesting that he wants the budget done by July 13th. That appears to be when he might want to launch. When do you think this is going to get done?
Yeah, it's not going to be done by June 30th. I can guarantee that, and we are looking more and more like mid to late July.
Okay, your sense on this, Dan Adams?
Well, I am amazed. Where is the governor? I mean, this is a leadership moment, and if the national audience is looking for someone who can come back, unify his party primarily, and get things done, this would be the moment to do it. When there's incredible dysfunction among the ranks of people who have to put together a pretty tight, in terms of revenue, budget document.
Okay, you're a former state representative. You're in touch with some of those people. What's going on? What's happening?
Yeah, I don't think it's the level of dysfunction that you're talking about, but I think this is what happens in a state budget when all of the additional revenue is being spent on Medicaid right now. So there isn't additional dollars to be spent. There have been some that have said that the gas tax revenue has been flat for the last 10 years. The expenses have continued to increase, so we need to increase revenue somehow. The governor is opposed to a gas tax increase or a fee increase. So the only other choice then is to borrow more money or to reduce the number of projects we have in the state. You have your choice of projects all over the state or the zoo interchange. So which ones do you decide not to do?
Well, I mean,
and you have legislators out of state that are saying, why do we always have to send all of our money down to Milwaukee?
Well, I understand that, and it's kind of interesting that we have people talking about investing in the Bucks arena, but then raising questions about the biggest transportation project. It's a little bit like, though, having an open heart surgery and then deciding that you're not going to finish the surgery because we've already begun the zoo interchange. We're kind of in there for that. So, you've been involved in these kinds of negotiations. How hard is it to come back from the kind of squabble we were discussing and then sit down and cut a deal, Linda Brewer?
Well, I think you can, but I think that, one of the problems here is that when the Republicans for years have been saying, put us in charge and we'll run things smoothly, that there's been gridlock because the Dems controlled one level and the Republicans controlled another. Well, now Republicans control the governorship, the House, and the Senate, and they're having this, meltdown. And I think it's a major leadership issue, not just for Scott Walker, because yes, he should be, the top dog on this. But the bottom line is these are all adults, and if they really want to move this Republican agenda forward, they better decide to do some compromising and move forward.
Okay, the other big question, of course, is the Bucks arena. My gut sense on this is that with all of the problems that they're having in coming to agreement on prevailing wage and on the transportation, but that there is just no way they're going to keep that Bucks arena in the budget. What do you think?
I agree, and especially if it's coming out of the budget and it's going to be some sort of coalition that involves Democrats, it's best to get it get it away from this process for the moment and put it down the road.
Okay, Michelle, let's
yeah, but if they pull it out of the budget, I highly doubt it's going to happen, and then we're going to see the Bucks leave Milwaukee.
Well, it's possible. Again, you push it off to the fall, and the
then
political dynamics change.
Right, but if you need the Democrats to vote for it, what are they going to take back? We're expanding school choice in the state budget. Are they going to take that back?
But are they going to get enough votes in the state Senate or the state assembly to pass a budget with all of this stuff in it right now? I mean, I think we saw over the last week how difficult it is to come to agreement. And you put in something that toxic, I don't think it's going to happen, and I don't think it's going to mean the Bucks will leave. What has your glass half full? What has your glass half empty? Let's go around the table. We'll start with you, Dan Adams.
My glass is half empty because many of my fellow Democrats are still opposing President Obama's Trade Promotion Authority bill that would help American companies sell more goods and agricultural products abroad. Our country prospers through trade. But my glass is half full because Wisconsin Congressman Ron Kind bucked the trend and put together 28 Democratic votes for the trade bill, allowing it to pass the House. Democrats are lucky to have a leader like Kind in Congress.
Michelle Hitchens.
My glass is half full because I have the greatest, most loving and supportive dad in the world. My glass is half empty because far too many children don't have a father in their lives, and that is a tragedy. And I love you, Dad.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my glass is half full because Donald Trump is running for president and already upsetting the party faithful by throwing fellow Republicans under the bus. But my glass is half empty because Trump is only running to seek publicity for himself, his brand, and his far-right fringe views.
Colin Roth.
My glass is half full because one way or another, the important debate over prevailing wage is coming to a head. It's half empty because Assembly Labor Committee Chair Andre Jacques may lose his chairmanship for helping foster this important debate with a public hearing.
Well, my glass is half full because Madison's hippie mayor, Paul Soglin, is trying to inject some common sense into the city's policies on homelessness. Madisonians, he said, quote, want empathy but not fornication on picnic tables where people eat. They want understanding but not feces on public sidewalks. He sounds like a liberal mugged by reality. My glass is half empty because the liberal political establishment in Madison is rejecting his ideas. Next on Sunday Insight, questions about how the champion of campaign finance reform handled his own political action committee. He's Mr. Campaign Finance Reform, right? The questions last week about how former Senator Russ Feingold has handled his own political action committee. The Journal-Sentinel reported that Feingold had raised $7.1 million for the committee, but spent only 5% of that on candidates or political parties. The rest went for fundraising, paying a group of Feingold aides hundreds of thousands of dollars, and paying Feingold himself more than $77,000. Other reports suggested that Feingold used the fund for lavish dinners, four-star hotels, and maybe even to pay for his Washington, D.C. apartment. All of this took place after he was defeated for re-election in 2010. Feingold is running in next year's election against the man who beat him then, Ron Johnson. So is this going to be a problem, Dan Adams?
In the short term, it certainly is, but and that's the point that I think that is being underreported, is why is this terrible story coming out now where something 16 months from the election, usually the really bad stuff comes out later so it has maximum impact on the polls. And I think that says a lot about how Senator Johnson sees himself in this race. He's something like 13 points down.
Senator Johnson has nothing to do with this. This was Dan Bice from the Journal-Sentinel.
But who do you think fed him this story? And I think it's interesting that they're trying to take Feingold down a peg so that Senator Johnson can get the national resources he needs.
Take him down many notches, and I think this actually says that Russ Feingold thought he was not going to run for public office again, so he saw this loophole and this ability to kind of live large on other people's money, and it's exactly what he did, and he never thought he was going to get caught at it.
Okay, long-term, short-term problem?
Well, I think it's a problem in the short term, but more a problem for insiders than the public at large. The public at large views these types of stories, unless they result in convictions, charges and convictions, they're kind of sleepers. They slept through the Walker investigation, that type of thing, and the bottom line is, at this point, all they know is that he got $77,000 in salary out of $7 million. But if that starts adding up, if he really did do his apartment, if all of a sudden Feingold's pocketing $1 million, you got a problem. And there's nothing right now that says that.
Colin Roth.
I love this story too, but I'm skeptical that the story has real legs. What it's going to do is probably be down the line used to show some of his hypocrisy. You know, he is the white knight of campaign finance reform, and to be exploiting this. And we Republicans have some of these scam packs on our side that take in lots of money and raise money.
It is a scam pack, and I think this is why it's damaging, because you know his image when he was first elected were two things. Number one, that he was the sanctimonious, self-righteous, holier than thou candidate. That he was also the funny, happy-go-lucky guy. Neither of which was true. So this goes right at the heart of his image, that he is Mr. Clean. Now, Lynn is right that it's very, very early, and this is insider. However, as I've said on the radio in the past, in his first iteration in politics, he went for 18 years without ever having any negative coverage of him by the mainstream media at all. What this will do is, I think, it may hurt that ongoing narrative, the image, and it goes again to something kind of fundamental for Russ Feingold. I mean, if you are Mr. Clean, you're more vulnerable. I mean, if this was about the Clintons, okay, we know the Clintons are corrupt. I mean, we know that they run sham stuff, but this is a guy who has ranted and railed. And
criticized. He's criticized every other elected official and every Republican who's run out there who's taken any sort of third-party money.
Well, and I did think that Johnson's response was pretty telling. He said he has become what he despised. He has become exactly what he railed against. And he did it, and Michelle, I think, pointed this out as well, he did it when he thought nobody was looking. And you had that sense that what happened was, okay, I've lost for re-election. Basically, screw it. I'm gonna take care of myself now.
He was also in some professional flex. I think it's fair to say he didn't think he was coming back, and he didn't want to be a lawyer or a lobbyist or somebody who's glad-handing on the Hill for money.
He would not have done this if he was thinking he was running for re-election back then. I think this was, okay, I got this big sock of money. I'm gonna live for free in my apartment. I'm gonna pay myself a salary. I'm gonna keep my cronies on the salary.
But go ahead.
Well, I think we have to wait to find out, did he really do that with the apartment? Because I think that is a turning point that could revamp up this story.
I actually think I agree with you there. You may not want to hear it, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Dan Adams, you're first.
To state legislators, Wisconsin parents need good tools to be able to decide where to send their kids to school. Start focusing on how to make statewide exams the best tools to keep schools accountable, not how to undermine it by pushing parents to opt out.
Michelle Litchens.
Well, to Brian Williams, who is moving to MSNBC where they don't seem to care if someone lies. Brian, make sure if you are embellishing an experience, it is one supported by the far left, and you can say whatever you like with no fear of unemployment.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my advice is to Republicans and others is to admit that global warming is real. Last week, Pope Francis issued an historic encyclical about the environment, calling global warming a disturbing threat that requires immediate action to protect the world God gave us.
Colin Roth.
My advice is for legislative leaders to give up on the prospect of putting the arena deal in the budget and slow this process down. There is urgency, but this deal deserves more time, more consideration, and more scrutiny.
Well, my unsolicited advice is to Governor Scott Walker, come home. Get in a room with legislators. Knock heads together. Get a budget done. Lead. Then run for president. Next on Sunday Insight, is this art or just plain offensive? It's art, supposedly. The Milwaukee Art Museum has acquired a controversial work of art depicting former Pope Benedict made out of thousands of condoms. Artist Nikki Johnson says she was disturbed by comments the former Pope made about AIDS and condoms and decided to make the portrait fashioned from 17,000 condoms. The Milwaukee Art Museum says it will display the condom Pope portrait when the museum reopens its permanent collection galleries, which are being renovated. Reacting to this, the Milwaukee Archdiocese issued a statement saying that the acquisition of such so-called art is disappointing at best. The Catholic Church would stand strongly against any expression where the intention is to disrespect or mock a faith tradition or religious leaders. Ultimately, this is an underlying derision of the Catholic Church and, in this particular case, its moral teachings. Your thoughts, Linda Bruin?
Well, I actually happen to agree with the Archdiocese. It is freedom of expression. They have a right
You're big
to put
into
it up.
popes this week, aren't you?
No, but I think that when you get to this level of distaste, and this artist is actually very interesting to the far left. She is an activist artist. She's did a recent work of Michelle Obama's arms and hands, just of her hands, because she wanted to highlight the sexualization of black women. So there's, this woman is just going to keep doing these type of politically motivated pieces
which is
of art.
fine.
And if you don't like it, don't go see it. Right. I am absolutely not going to go pay the Milwaukee Art Museum to go see this piece of art. And that's the way you react to some freedom of expression you don't agree with.
Michelle Litchins.
Well, the Milwaukee Art Museum is obviously having a great PR campaign right now for free, right? But I think there would be value in having a cartoon of Muhammad right next to this if that's what they were going for.
Okay, that's not what's going to happen. I mean, they are praising themselves, saying, "Oh, we are so edgy, we're going out there." No, actually, it's just crude and it's frankly kind of boring.
It is, and it's distasteful.
Well, and I do think that we need to underline that they certainly have the right to do this. They have the constitutional freedom to be able to display this, to be as offensive as they want. But also, people have a constitutional right not to write them checks. Colin Roth.
Yeah, Charlie. I mean, I think most of us here are pretty free speech absolutists in a lot of ways, but the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of donors, there are a lot of patrons who aren't going to cut a check. There's a very strong Catholic community in Milwaukee area. They're not going to attend. And it may be tasteless, but if this passes for edgy.
Charlie, I'm just glad that they didn't go ahead with plans to buy the condom balloon animal collection. I'm kidding, of course. A private donor bought this piece for the museum, so there was no taxpayer money being spent. So that's a good thing. And if you don't like it, don't go to the show.
Yeah, but on the other hand, look, our art museums are about judgment, and there are tens, hundreds of thousands of artworks they can choose from. There are judgment calls, there are choices they make, but there's also consequences to those choices. And the Muhammad cartoon thing is obvious, but it is interesting that the only faith that I could imagine that they would say, hey, let's do this because it's edgy, would be making fun of the Pope, the Catholic Church. I cannot imagine them making fun of any other faith tradition. They certainly would never, ever, ever acquire a portrait of the Prophet Muhammad made out of condoms. So it's an interesting indication of the double standard, who you can offend these days and who you can't.
It sounds like you've just thrown out a challenge to the art
board. I mean, we absolutely know that they're not going to do it. And I remember when this first became controversial, one of my same reactions was, okay, maybe 30, 40 years ago this would have been edgy. It just seems really just sort of boring and dumb to me. What is it you don't get? Let's go around the table, and we'll start with you, Dan Adams.
Charlie, I don't get why Governor Walker is doing nothing to address the state's dismal levels of entrepreneurship. According to a report this month, Wisconsin now rates as dead last among states for startup activity. There needs to be leadership in this area.
Michelle Litchins.
Well, Charlie, what I don't get is if it is wrong for Rachel Dolezal to fake she is black, why is it right if she were to fake being a man?
Linda Bruin.
Scott Walker's pro-business job creation focus has been a hallmark of all of his campaigns. But with Wisconsin ranking 35th in the nation for job creation during his first term, and all other Midwestern states ranking higher, I don't get how he can be viewed as a credible leader on this issue.
Colin Roth.
What I don't get is why the president, Democratic lawmakers, and progressive activists are lobbying the Supreme Court to do the right thing and preserve Obamacare subsidies. This is not their job. They're to do the constitutional thing, and that may not mean cleaning up the mess created by Congress.
Well, what I don't get is, what can we do to keep crazy people from getting their hands on guns? Why are we so reluctant to address the problems and the dangers of mental illness? Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's a morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Dan Adams, you're first.
My winners are Chris Abley and Tom Barrett, who are working together to try to tackle chronic homelessness in Milwaukee by following the Housing First model that has been successful in places like Salt Lake City. My losers are Republicans, because it's you all, not us Democrats, just you, who have to listen, debate, and yes, pay attention to bloviating Donald Trump for the next 6 months before he inevitably drops out of the presidential race.
Michelle Litchins.
My winner is North Carolina woman Debbie Dills, who followed a suspicious car for 35 miles because she thought it matched the description of the Charleston shooter. And it was. She could have just called the police, and she's a hero for going above and beyond. Now, Donald Trump, you have a loser advisor if you think you can win a Republican primary by saying the greatest president is Bill Clinton and telling people how much money you're worth. It also doesn't help you campaign when you need to pay people to show up at your announcement. Quit before you're fired.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my winner is Universal Studios. Their new movie Jurassic World made more than $500 million last weekend, making more money in its opening weekend than any other movie in history. My loser deals with a much more serious topic. In the last 5 years, gunmen in mass shootings have murdered 85 children and adults and wounded more than 146 others. The latest attack came from the 21-year-old who wanted to start a race war and gun down the pastor and 8 members of the Bible study group in a historic black church in Charleston. He is the latest loser to join this group of truly evil men.
Colin Roth.
My winner this week is Representative Dean Knudsen, who didn't just buy the talking points on the arena proposal and found that the state may not be on the hook for Bradley Center costs. This could change the entire cheaper to keep them debate. My loser is Russ Feingold. The white knight of campaign finance reform was caught last week using his political action committee to pay his buddies and himself while donating less than 5% of the contributions to candidates. What a phony.
Well, my winner, Summerfest. The Rolling Stones roll into town on Tuesday and the world's greatest music festival returns to Milwaukee. Don't take for granted how great that is. Loser, I agree with Colin. Ross Feingold, the self-righteous, sanctimonious father of campaign finance reform, was exposed last week as both a phony and a hypocrite. By turning his political action committee into a slush fund, he behaved exactly like the politicians he's made a career of criticizing, and he did it when he thought no one was looking. Well, we're looking now, Russ. Thanks for joining us, and join me for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Happy Father's Day.